All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to dive into some architecture, some masonry, some symbolism here in the city of Portland. I think you're going to enjoy it. So on the right side of the screen, I am hovering over University of Southern Maine, Portland, and I'm looking at their law school right here. And that's important. Remember, this is a law school. That's going to come back. So as you can see here, it's done in a brutalist architecture style. And if we come over to the top, excuse me, and we go bird's eye, what you're looking at here is the alchemical symbol for Mercury. Mercury is a planet, it's a god, and it's an element. So you can see here Mercury is symbolized by the circle with a almost semicircle protruding from the top, which is exactly what this law building is modeled after. So let's go ahead and start with the god Mercury, okay? Mercury in mythology is from Latin Mercurius. He is a major god in Roman religion and mythology, being one of the 12 diconsentes within the Roman pantheon. Here's what he is the god of. Pay attention. He is the god of financial gain. Not finances, but financial gain, commerce, eloquence, messages, communication, including divination, which regards magic, travelers, boundaries, luck, trickery, and thieves. Wow. So Mercury, according to the Romans, is a god of quite a few different things you wouldn't think go together, right? He's the god of luck, trickery, and thieves. Well, of course, law deals with trickery and thieves, right? And then he's also the god of financial gain and commerce, which is interesting as well because these are things that courts often deal with, that law often deals with. Now, if you follow my channel for a while, you know that Mercury is derived from the earlier god Hermes in Greek. So Hermes is an Olympian deity in ancient Greek religion and mythology. Hermes is considered the herald of the gods. He is also considered the protector of human heralds, travelers, and thieves, merchants, and orators. So you can see the similar identifying traits that Mercury has. He is able to move quickly and freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine, aided by his winged sandals. Hermes plays the role of the psychopomp or soul guide, a conductor of souls into the afterlife. Okay, so Mercury and Hermes are both symbolized by the winged sandals I think Mercury has, and then you see here it says they are able to move quickly and freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Mercury in the sky, I believe it's the fastest moving planet. Let's check. I just don't want to give you guys bad information. Okay, Mercury is the fastest moving planet. Mercury both ways in the sky. Okay, so Mercury also, you've heard of Mercury in retrograde, right? Mercury appears to travel both directions in the sky. I really hope that's true. I'd feel very silly if if I was saying that and it wasn't true. I'm basing that off of my mind. I think that's true. Yeah. So Mercury, let's go back to Hermes here. So Hermes is able to move quickly and freely between the worlds of the mortal and the divine. So Hermes and Mercury, they're not restricted like the rest of the luminaries in the sky, right? They seem to be able to move whatever way they want, and that's very important. So where does Hermes come from, though? Hermes, as you probably know from my channel, comes from Thoth, and we're going to talk about him next. But Mercury and Hermes are also soul guides. Why are they soul guides? Because Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. And when it comes to masonry and, mystery religions, what does the sun symbolize? It symbolizes God. Not the Christian God. It symbolizes the achievement of a God state that man, through illumination and through rebirth, can achieve. So ultimately, the sun symbolizes the God state that man is working for, okay? So the reason that Mercury and Hermes are the messengers of the god, I think it's clicking for you, because Mercury is closest to the sun, right? You get it? And once again, he can move quickly and freely because Mercury is the only luminary that travels both ways, I believe, in the night sky. And it's the fastest of them all, too. Okay. In myth, Hermes functioned as the emissary and the messenger of the gods. Just explain that. He was often presented as the son of Zeus and Maya, He is regarded as the divine trickster, for which Homer offers the most popular account in his hymn to Hermes. And that divine trickster will come from, the idea that it moves both ways in the sky, okay? His attributes and symbols include the Herma, the rooster, the tortoise, the satchel, the talaria, which are the winged sandals, the winged helmet, as well as the palm tree, the goat, the number 4, several kinds of fish, and incense. And of course, the caduceus, the staff of the 2 snakes, right, and the wings. Well, why is he symbolized by a palm tree? That I can't tell you, but what I can tell you is that Masonry uses the palm tree as a symbol for victory. So I'd imagine it's derived from a similar meaning. Yes, and here's an example of that. So if you've followed my channel for a while, months ago I made an episode called Cutler Navy Radio Station Base. It's in Cutler, Maine, near the Canadian border, way up there in the middle of nowhere. It was built, I think, during or after World War II. I'm not quite sure. But as you can see, up here, at the very northern part of Maine, these Masons went through the trouble of planting a palm tree. So you can see right here, palm trees do not do well in Maine. But this is an example of our Masonic-controlled military institutions putting their symbolism right in plain sight. And of course, you have the arch right here, right? Just like every Masonic building has. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that real quick. Palm tree at Cutler Navy Radio Station. And yeah, it's a symbol of Hermes, right? Hermes, Mercury, Thoth. And then notice the goat, of course. Wonderful, right? We all know what that is. Okay. So, Hermes himself comes from ancient Egypt. And I've explained this quite a few times, so I'll go over it again. Ancient Egypt mythology was transferred to the Greeks towards the end of Egyptian culture. This would be from 1000 BC to 0, really the dying millennium of the Egyptian Empire. And in Greece, they would take what they called exiles, which is not the way we think of exile today. It wasn't a punishment, but, upper-class Greeks, philosophers, statesmen, thinkers, I said philosophers, they would take an exile to Egypt where they would learn from the Egyptian priest. They would go through the initiation in the Great Pyramid, like Pythagoras and Plato did, and Solon. And a lot of our understanding of the pantheon of ancient Egypt comes from that Greek interpretation, that transfer of knowledge, right? So Thoth is the inspiration for Hermes. Hermes was the inspiration for Mercury. So let's read a little bit about Thoth. Ancient Egyptian. He is like the ibis. That's a translation of his Egyptian name. Thoth is an ancient Egyptian deity. In art, he was often depicted as a man with the head of an ibis or a baboon, animals sacred to him. His feminine counterpart was Seshat, and his wife was Ma'at. He was the god of wisdom, writing, hieroglyphs, science, magic, art, judgment, and the dead. There you go. So Thoth, representing judgment, and let's keep reading. Thoth's chief temple was located in the city of Hermopolis, later known as El Ashumain. It was partially destroyed in 1826. In Hermopolis, Thoth led the Ogdoad, a pantheon of 8 principal deities, and his spouse was Nametawi. He also had numerous shrines in other other cities. Thoth played many vital and prominent roles in Egyptian mythology, such as maintaining the universe and being one of the 2 deities who stood on either side of Ra's solar bark. Boom, that's important. Ra is the sun god, right, of ancient Egypt. And of course, Mercury, Hermes, Thoth, sits closest to Ra, the sun. In the later history of ancient Egypt, Thoth became heavily associated with the arbitration of godly disputes. Wow, look at that, you guys. So closest to God, messenger of the god, and the arbiter of godly disputes. Sounds a lot like a lawyer, doesn't it? The arts of magic, the system of writing, the development of science, and of course, the judgment of the dead. So all 3 of these gods, according to Wikipedia, you can tell they are gods of law. They're gods of, fairness, and Hermes and Mercury are gods of thieves. So you're starting to see how this can apply to a law school. Once again, let me pull this up. So, yep, there's your symbol for Mercury on the left, and then on the right here, you can see the bird's eye view of USM's law school. And like I said, we also have a hexagon and a downward-facing pyramid, triangle, whatever you want to call it. The hexagon and the triangle, these are both important. So the downward-facing triangle represents water. It's an alchemical symbol, okay? We'll get back to it. And the hexagon here represents the Ogdoad. Or not the Ogdoad, I'm sorry. Let me read from this for you. The Ogdoad is the 8 gods associated with Thoth. Okay, I got some interesting pictures here. Let me just go through. You know what? I'm going to have to show you. I'm going to have to show you guys. Bear with me. I'm going to be reading out of John Anthony West's Serpent in the Sky. I'm going to be showing you that. I know it's hard to see, but basically all you got to get out of it is you can see the hexagon, correct? This is an interpretation of Thoth with his arms stretched out. Okay, this is from an actual hieroglyph. And then you can see the geometric relationship between the hieroglyph of Thoth and the hexagon, as well as the downward-facing triangle, okay? Let me read what it says. And remember, Thoth is the ancient Egyptian god of pretty much law, you know? Being the arbiter of disputes between God's word or God's knowledge. So let's read what it says here. The ibis-headed Thoth is master of measures, and Schwaller de Lubitsch found that successive hexagons circumscribed about the 18 by 19 grid determine Thoth's unusual dimensions. So what that means is when the scribes, right, when the scribes were creating these hieroglyphs, the hexagon and the triangle were tools. That's, you know, they used geometry in their hieroglyphs. They were not primitive people, right? These things are mathematically calculated. Math comes from Egypt, whether you want to believe that or not. Really, all of our knowledge can be traced back to Egypt. So basically what John Anthony West is saying is that the hexagon and the downward-facing triangle were critical for the drawing of Thoth, the god. So when we come over to our Thoth-shaped school, Mercury, Hermes, Thoth, that's why, in my opinion, we can see the hexagon with the downward-facing triangle right on the rooftop. Pretty cool, right? Now, let's go over to the jewishvirtuallibrary.org. I found this. This is pretty interesting. Let me take a sip of coffee. Where was it? Okay, cool. In some alchemic writings, the philosopher's stone is symbolized as a circle enclosing a hexagonal star, which the Jews call the Star of David. So come back to Google Earth, you have your circle enclosing the hexagon, right? The circle alludes to the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, or infinite. The triangle, which points upward, represents the element fire, and the one which points downward, the element water. So you can see the downward triangle here. And this is all going to tie together in a second. Fire and water together constitute heaven. From the 17th century, this was used by alchemists to symbolize the primeval matter out of which the main element of the philosopher's stone, philosophic Mercury, the quintessence, is extracted. How crazy is that, right? Let me read that again. From the 17th century, this was used by alchemists to symbolize the primeval matter out of which the main element of the philosopher's stone, philosophic Mercury, the quintessence, is extracted. And that's in regards to the Star of David, the hexagon, so in the triangle. Now, if you took an upward-facing triangle and laid it, you know, on top of this downward-facing one, of course, you would get the Star of David, right? Okay, what else we got here? Just a quick Google search. If you search alchemy, Mercury, and water, you get this. Water. Aristotle labeled water. Aristotle was an ancient Greek philosopher. So he would have done an exodus or an exile. I'd imagine he did his exile. I'm not sure if he did though. Aristotle labeled water as cold and wet, and Hippocrates connected it to the body humor phlegm. Additionally, it's associated with intuition as well as the color blue, and is often linked to the alchemy symbol for Mercury, as both are seen as feminine symbols. So, that's why you have a downward-facing triangle on the roof of the Mercury-shaped building, right? Because water, symbolized by the triangle, is linked to the alchemical symbol for Mercury. What else we got here? I wanted to show you in the Hebrew calendar that in 1972, when this building was made, it was a Hebrew year 57 33, of course. What else we got? Oh, I got more for you. Hold on. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and read... Actually, of course, we got to read the definition of Mercury from the 1886 Bible. If you're new to the channel, not Bible, dictionary. If you're new to the channel, the modern Merriam-Webster dictionary has 720 pages, I believe. This one has 1,938 pages. So, over the course of a little over 100 years, the dictionary decreased its size by 100%, more than 100%. Okay, Mercury. From Latin mercurius, said to be formed from Mercies, wares, or Mercari. 1. The son of Jupiter and Maya, the messenger and interpreter of the gods. Right, what does the law do? What do judges do? What do lawyers do? They are the interpreters of the law. Well, if you believe the law comes from God, it's God's word, right? It makes perfect sense that Mercury is the interpreter of the gods. And when I say things like, if you believe God, you got to understand that these people, these Masons, right? Whether you believe in God or not, the people who control society absolutely do. Just depends on what God we're talking about. Okay, he's also the god of eloquence and commerce, called by the Greeks Hermes. Then there's a graphic of him there. You can see the caduceus with the winged helmet and the winged sandals. Okay, 2, the chemical definition. A certain metal, white like silver, liquid at common temperatures and congealing at 40 degrees below zero on Fahrenheit scale, and having a specific gravity of 13.6. Quicksilver, hydrargyrum, it acts as a poison, and its compounds are largely used in medicine. It is found in nature, usually in combination with sulfur, forming cinnabar, named by the alchemist after the god Mercury. 3. Medicine. A salt or preparation of mercury used as a remedial agent, as calomel, blue pill, etc. 4. Astronomy. One of the planets of the solar system, being the one nearest to the sun, from which its mean distance is about 37 million miles, its period is 88 days, and its diameter 3,000 miles. 5. A carrier of tidings, a newsboy, a messenger, hence also a newspaper, right? There's a lot of newspapers called the Mercury. 6. Sprightly or mercurial quality, warmth of temperament, spirit, uneasiness of mutuality, tickleness. 7. A plant, the leaves of which are sometimes used for spinach in Europe. Okay, we got it all, right? Just so we know our basic definition from back in the day before everybody became really dumb. Let's read about Mercury in terms of alchemy, and then I think we can bring this all together and we'll explain at the end, once again, the meaning of all this. In the ancient art of alchemy, such as in Hermeticism, right? So, little side note, the mystery religions of the Western world, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, Knights Templar, etc., Skull and Bones, they all fall into a category of thought called Hermeticism. And Hermeticism is based on the Hermetica, which is a book. The book was resurfaced and it kicked off the Renaissance, so it's a very important book. Well, the Hermetica is said to be the writings of Hermes Trismegistus, and Hermes Trismegistus is what they called Hermes or Thoth in ancient times, right? So the Hermetica and the Hermetic tradition are really the continuation of Thoth, the ancient Egyptian god's wisdom, and it's come all the ways down to the modern day where we still identify it. You may have heard of Thoth's emerald tablets, right? That's why the color green is always, or emerald is always associated with mystery and Hermeticism, like the Wizard of Oz, right? The Emerald City. Okay. As sulfur is a symbol for the active principle, Mercury is a symbol for the passive principle. The symbol of Mercury is the cosmic womb being incubated by the cross of the 4 elements of creation: earth, air, fire, and water. Rising up out of the cosmic womb is the creatrix field. It is a partial form whose features are not yet determined as the raw substances undergo purification under each law of alchemy to reach the final magnum opus. The light energy of the solar force is the source of all life, and thus is alchemy considered the universal Mercury. Also, on the Earth in the physical plane, Mercury is described as a water element. There's your downward-facing triangle, right, on top of the Mercury-shaped building. That's a symbol for water. When the raw material of the earth unites with the cosmic womb of Mother, the divine fire water, or Azoth, is manifested. In the natural laws, all forms of energy are transferable from one source to another. Each civilization had its own legends about Mercury, and it was used as everything from a medicine to a talisman. Mercury's chemical symbol, Hg, comes from the Greek hydrargyrum, meaning liquid silver. Mercury is also known as quicksilver, a reference to its mobility, and used as the physical symbol to represent the Azoth or firewater in ancient alchemy. Speed and mobility were characteristics of the Greek-Roman god Mercury, or Hermes, who served as a messenger of knowledge to all the other gods and shares his name with the planets nearest the sun. So yeah, Mercury, Hermes being the messenger between God and people, between God and the other gods, and that all has to do with his location close to the sun. Okay, alchemical quicksilver. This glyph derives from an ancient Greek drawing representing the winged sandal or the caduceus wand of the messenger god Mercury, that symbol on the right. The symbol predates the god, having previously been in use as an emblem of the Punic goddess Tanit. The glyph represents the planet Mercury in astrology, Mercury as alchemical quicksilver, and as a magical element Mercurius. Alchemically, Mercury is analogous to the human spirit, and one of the three major alchemical principles with sulfur and salt. So yeah, Mercury represents a trinity, the alchemical trinity of, like they said, mercury, sulfur, and salt. It's also within itself a trinity because you have Mercury the planet, Mercury the element, and Mercury the god. Not only that, there's a trinity underlying all of this when you think of Thoth, Hermes, and Mercury. It's very interesting. 33s. All right, Mercury in astrology. This is probably going to be important. Mercury has rulership of two mutable signs, Gemini and Virgo, air and earth, respectively. As ruler of Gemini, Mercury is exalted or matured in Virgo, because knowledge is matured in being put to use. Acquired knowledge remains in its childhood, if it is not projected or expressed for the ongoing evolution during the soul incarnation. Only through knowledge can service be fulfilled and divine purpose be manifested, with material affairs improved. Anything that is rightly known, such as in experiencing gnosis, can be rightly used. Perpetuating darkness is a result of ignorance and is the path to wrongly used knowledge and corrupt service. Mercury is a messenger in astrology, as it is in mythology. It is the planet of day-to-day expression and communication. So, what better role does the court play? Does law play? It's a way to communicate between all aspects of society, right? So if a diehard Christian and a diehard Muslim who speak two different languages from two different parts of the world are living in America and they get into a dispute, it's Mercury, it's Hermes, it's the law, the judge, the court, who is going to see that communication and make sure that, God's message is provided. What would God want to do, right? What would Mercury want to do? Mercury will tell us because he's a messenger of the gods. Mercury's action is to take things apart and put them back together again. It is an opportunistic planet, decidedly unemotional and curious. So what two better ways to describe a good judge? Unemotional and curious. Mercury not only rules communication, it represents coordination. Thought processes, ideas, and sensory information from both unconscious and unconscious sources. Unconscious and conscious sources. They all need to be coordinated and understood. Makes perfect sense. So Mercury, the god, or the planet, or the element, whatever we're talking about, the alchemical meaning of Mercury is coordinating and understanding the sensory knowledge. Once again, law, legislature, court, constitutions. Why do we do all of this? Because we're all on this plane trying to make sense of our five senses, right? So Mercury is going to coordinate that and help us understand it. Mercury is the link, the messenger between the gods, higher principles, and humankind. There you go. Mercury is the link between higher principles and humankind. That's the basis of our law, right? We want to take our higher principles that we can all agree on and exalt them and make sure we follow them. It is through Mercury that we learn, first, the objective nature and quality of things, and then the awareness of principles opens our consciousness to the subjective reality. On both octaves we are learning, but on the first we integrate through identification. On the second level, we know through direct experience, which yields gnosis. The planet Mercury rules the planetary sphere of Hod, which is the 8th sphere in the Kabbalistic tree of life, 10 spheres or Sephiro. That's very interesting. So Mercury rules the planetary sphere of Hod, which is the 8th sphere. Well, if we go back to John Anthony West, Thoth, who is the same as Mercury, represents the Ogdoad, or a pantheon of 8 Egyptian gods. Okay, in Hermeticism. Parts of the Hermetica appeared in the 4th century Gnostic library found in Nag Hammadi. So yeah, the Hermeticas showed up and disappeared quite a few times. So when I mentioned the Renaissance, that was just the most recent rebirth of the Hermetica. But it has shown up, as you can see here, in the 4th century. Another famous tract is the Emerald Tablet of Thoth, which teaches the doctrine, as above, so below. The Hermetica are Egyptian Greek wisdom texts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, which are mostly presented as dialogues in which a teacher, generally identified as Hermes Trismegistus, enlightens a disciple. The texts form the basis of Hermeticism. They discuss the divine, the cosmos, the mind, and nature. Some touch upon alchemy, astrology, and related concepts. Orders: Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. These are examples of groups. Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, or the Ordo Templi Orientis. So you can see right here, Aleister Crowley's name comes up, right? It can be used for evil, it can be used for good, right? So in our country, we like to think that our laws and our courts and our judges are used for good. But you got to remember, Mercury is the god of tricksters and thieves. So in our day-to-day life, every day we can look at examples of injustice coming from our courts, and we shake our head and we go, what the heck is going on? Like when it comes to our politicians breaking laws all the time, what we're living through right now, right? Well, we can't put complete faith in a Masonic-controlled institution like courts and laws and judges that believes in duality, because that's exactly what's represented by the attributes of Mercury. So he's the god of communication, but he's also the god of trickery, right? So it goes both ways. There's a duality to it. So I think that can help explain why we see so much injustice in our world. So much injustice, right? Like, they never found the other guy involved with David Dorn's shooting. You know what I mean? But they'll go after, KR and slander his whole family. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like we see it with BLM. They invoke the names of criminals while innocent black people are killed in the riots for these people they're invoking. So it's just ridiculous. It's duality, right? It's good and bad, light and dark. So let's sum this up real quick. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Basically what we're saying here is the building on the right at USM is shaped like the alchemical symbol for Mercury. Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. Sun represents God, or the God state that man can achieve through illumination and rebirth. So Mercury is the messenger of the gods because Mercury is closest to the sun. Mercury is also the god of travel or whatever. He's quickly able to travel because Mercury is the fastest planet, right? And he's able to go between the divine and the plane we live in because Mercury in the sky goes both ways, right? Then the roof here, we have the downward facing triangle because Mercury is related to water. It's related to coolness, right? And the downward triangle is the alchemical symbol for water. And then, of course, we had the hexagram here. And from the Jewish Virtual Library, we learned about how the hexagram, let me see if I can find it again. I'm curious, I would like to read that again. In some alchemic writings, the philosopher's stone is symbolized as a circle enclosing a hexagonal star. The circle alludes to the Kabbalistic Ein Sof, the triangle, which points upward. Okay, we know that. From the 17th century, this was used by alchemists to symbolize the primeval matter out of which the main element of the philosopher's stone, philosophic Mercury, the quintessence, is extracted. Pretty cool, right? Okay. Now, let me see if I covered everything here. According to Aristotle, Mercury is related to water, cold and wet, and it's also related to the moon, right? Let's look that up. Mercury, moon. In ancient symbology, water embodies the moon, the feminine and the mercurial nature. Alchemical Mercury often being called Luna, or the feminine. Mercury was and is always the water in all. Pretty cool, right? So, I guess to wrap it up in one sentence, the architect of USM's law school was definitely invoking Thoth, Hermes, Mercury. the messenger of the gods, right? And the god of tricksters and thieves. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys. Pretty cool. Yeah, I'll be back later today. I have some more interviews to upload, and we'll find something good to do.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.